Hello, students. It's time to go back to college. I don't really want to shop for my dorm, though. It's too busy at Target, too busy at Walmart. So let's just talk football. I'm Stephen Rabinowitz, Hofstra class of 2002, majored in broadcast journalism because there were not any classes in podcasting.
I'm Jay Kaplan, St. John's class of 92, where I majored in uh, communications with a focus on radio and television. Hence, I'm here.
I'm Anthony Strait, Hofstra class of '06, broadcasting in
Oh, six,
English.
by the way, not '02. I can't believe I fucked that up.
That was your first year, probably. I was a
It
transfer
was, it
student.
was.
By the way, I'll do that over. I'm Anthony Strait, Hofstra class of '06. Actually, worked with this guy, Rabinowitz, in WRHU at one point. And by the way, before I continue, World Pride, happy 106th birthday, Sister Jean.
Yeah, woohoo!
Forever young. And obviously, big Chicago Loyola fan, and just look, 106 years old. That is
God
one of the
bless.
most unbelievable blessings, and I would love to see her around for 107,
Amen.
I
and
would love to
definitely
see
want to
you
see her,
around for many
and
more.
want to see her, yeah, and definitely would love to see her one more time in March at least.
Absolutely. This is on the Sports Lines, the college football preview edition. I can't believe it's almost fall. Well,
Mm.
technically, it's still fall for another month, but you know what I mean. On tonight's show, we'll talk about everything you'll see on Saturdays over the next few months, the Heisman favorites, game of the year in week one, and of course, sign stealing on some specific teams' biggest questions. Here's another question. Where can I subscribe to find on the Sports Lines content? Well, I have the answer. YouTube.com and Facebook.com, both with the backslash of on the sports lines, one word. But first, as we enter the second year of the 12 team playoff, some people want to double the damn thing. What the hell? The Big Ten, who has seemingly gotten a dare to eventually get Nebraska to a playoff and an actual national championship, has come up with a proposal that might do that. It would expand the college football playoff in the future to 24. There is a 28 team one out there. We're not talking about that, just the 24 team one. As we finish off the second season and go into a new contract of just
Mm.
a measly 12 team CFP playoff. Weak sauce. In this 24 team model, the Big Ten and SEC would get 7 automatic bids. I'm Marone. And the ACC and Big 12 would each receive 5, 2 auto bids for non-Power 4 conferences, and 2 at-large teams. Hooray! Oh, and a majority of games would be on campus. That's something the CFP got right a year ago. We'll talk about that probably in this segment. Jay,
Yeah.
you're intrigued by this idea. Don't like it. Doesn't say you like it, but you're intrigued. Tell us why.
Let's just be clear, okay? I am not a fan of anything that Tony Petitti of the Big Ten introduces, and that includes this. For the record, I like the current 12-team CFP format, especially since they've made the tweak to do the seeding by the CFP rankings. I don't think we need to immediately rush headlong into expanding to 16 teams or more. And as I've previously stated, I'm not a fan of the 5-11 and 4-4-2-2-1-3 models being proposed, though if I had to choose, I'm more amenable to the 5-11 model. All that being said, if expansion is inevitable, then as a March Madness fan, I'd want something more akin to the way the conference tournaments are set up, even if that means double buys for the top seeds. That's why I like the FCS model over the latest piece of selfishness from Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti, where his conference and this SEC get an inordinate and unfair number of automatic qualifying bids. Now, the FCS format has a 2014 field with automatic bids for each of the 10 conference champions, with the remaining 14 being at-large selections made by a committee. The top 8 seeds get a first-round bye and await the winners of games played by seeds 9 through 16. Yes, it means a bigger role for the selection committee, who is tweaking their process for year 2 of the 12-team field, adding new metrics to better weigh strength of schedule, just in time for the SEC to get ready to go to a 9-game conference schedule, about fracking time. But as a March Madness fan, I don't have a problem with it, especially since the FCS format provides a straight path to the playoff. Win your conference and you're in. With 14 at-large bids, the Big Ten and the SEC would stop complaining, we hope, about the number of teams in their conferences that would miss the cut. Using last year's rankings, Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Missouri, and Illinois would have made the field even with their 9-3 records. BYU from the Big 12 and Miami from the ACC would have also deservedly made the field. The Power Four schools and Notre Dame, if they're ranked in a given season, would likely get the bulk of the at-large bids, but there's still opportunities for other D1 schools from the American Conference USA, the MAC, Mountain West, and the Pac-12 once it has 8 teams again in 2026. And the Sun Belt leagues, as their champion, would get an automatic qualifying bid. Is a team from outside the Power Four plus Notre Dame group likely to go on a Cinderella run in this version of the CFP like they might in March Madness? Unlikely, but this setup allows for the possibility, and that's a much fairer system than we have now. And since we know that Petitti and his BFF Greg Sankey of the SEC are all about the money, regardless of however they try to frame expansion being about the teams they put on the field, a 2014 field will mean a crap ton of money no matter what. More games being played means more money. It's math even a kindergartner could do. The FCS model is a proven playoff format. Would there be some scheduling quirks and logistical issues to sort out? Sure, but the FCS managed it every time they increased the size of the field. From the initial 4, sound familiar, in 1978 to 8 in 1981, 12 in 82, 16 in 86, 20 in 2010, and the current 2014 format that began in 2013. Boise State AD Jeremiah Dickey summed up the state of things best, telling The Athletic back in May, quote, "People have been grandfathered in over the course of time, and some have a seat at the table and some don't, and they're deemed autonomous 4, and everyone else is not. And here's your one seat at the table to get to the CFP. That just doesn't feel right." I agree. Any type of expansion needs to be done not for greed and ego, but for the greater good of the sport.
Anthony, go ahead.
In theory, expansion would be a great idea, but I don't know if in actuality, especially with Division One, that it would be even remotely feasible. Mainly because money, of course. Like everybody has a hand in the cookie jar, and everyone wants 1 or 2 more Oreo cookies more than the other person at this point. And we know the Big Ten and the SEC are trying to weasel their way to show how big and better the conferences are. And I think I talked about what it's called a penis measuring contest with some of these school presidents when it comes to things like that. But also they have bowls, like 30 bowl games that you have sponsors that are throwing out there to pay for their name to be licensed to some of these games and even the smaller colleges, and it kind of helps them with the exposure and the fact that they do get some of that money as well.
Yeah.
But also, and then you also look at the TV contracts. And how does that work? I mean, we literally had ESPN leasing college football playoff games to Turner Sports.
Hey, open the field back up, get more broadcast partners.
So that how would that be worked out as well? So it's just a whole big thing that comes down to money and just how would that exactly work. It's almost like you're trying to go through a breakup and you're still in a honeymoon phase of a relationship. We're literally in the first year, okay? There was literally no such thing as a perfect system, but we always managed to make it work. Hey, look, we talked about the NCAA tournament, the men's tournament being 64 teams at one point. We expanded to 68. Now we literally have a first round just to get in, and something that's been it's more fun games to watch. Like it's a playoff before you actually get to the playoff. The NBA has had the playing tournament for the last few years now, and that has created some drama within itself. So there's been tinkering to it. I just like for right now, let's see how this 12-team format plays out the next few years before we think about expanding. I would like to see maybe 14, maybe 14. 2 more teams. 24 just seems very excessive. Just for
Oh,
me,
and
it just
I'm not
it
arguing
could be
with that.
excessive.
I'm just saying that if they're going to propose one, and Petiti already came out with one, I'd rather you go with one that already exists and is a lot more egalitarian in terms of access from more teams, from more conferences overall. I agree with you. I would like them to leave it at 12 for a while. I know they can change it next after 2026, but honestly, I like the 12 and I think it works. Just let it breathe for a little while. I agree with you on that.
And also, one of the best things about the 12 tournament was the introduction to home playoff games. I mean, like, look, the games were not competitive, but it was great to see some of these colleges actually host a playoff game because we see that in Division 2,
Yeah,
Division 3, and
yeah.
then see it on the bigger stages for the first time is a welcome sight. I'm just like, look, tinker with maybe how you do the seating, perhaps.
They're doing
Maybe
this year.
Which
you
you're
could do
doing
that.
this year.
What they're doing this year, maybe looking maybe if how you determine at large bids, you can maybe play around with that a little bit more. Maybe factor into opponent scheduling and whatnot.
Doing that.
Like you can always tinker around with formulas. I'm just saying before you upgrade to a Cadillac, when the Buick is only a year old and still got about 5,000 miles left on it, let's just see exactly how this thing plays out a little bit. If you want to add a couple more teams, make it 14, whereas the need for a buy is even more because I feel like 2014, like this many teams, will take away from how important regular season games become. I mean,
Yes.
if it really absolutely
And
good value,
guys,
Open it
guys,
up to
guys,
more conferences. That's all. That you there. Now, if you're now opening it up to more conferences to allow more conference champions to get an automatic bid, then you're not necessarily watering down the regular season. You're just allowing more leagues to have a seat at the table with this model.
yeah, but the fact is, if you only have 11 if you only have like a 10 or 11 leagues, which college football right now is about 11 league system, you're still leaving yourself a gap of 14 teams left to, or 10 to 14 teams left to go to get into the dance. And those can be picked from other conferences if you go by the FCS rules. There is no model for how many teams you can take from one conferences, and then you go back to rankings. Those are arbitrary, and those are the ones that, unfortunately, because of strength of schedule and because of what happens, are going to favor the Big Ten and SEC very more. And by the way, I don't think Tony Bettini and Greg Sankey are going anywhere for holidays and vacations anytime soon.
I was being sarcastic,
I
Rabbi.
know you were being
Apologies for presenting
sarcastic,
the
but
air quotes.
I don't think they're going anywhere for any dinner or any tea or anywhere. I hate any expansion to this model so far for many reasons. Number one, I know the bowl system is outdated, but you do have a lot of kids who are not going to be playing college football for the rest of their career who do get one more chance to play. I'm not talking about the players that are coming in who are going to skip the bowls because they mean nothing. I'm talking about the players who will never either see action again or might see more action in the next season. And you take that away from a lot of teams. And if you go away from if you go with the model that you're doing, you're taking it away from more major schools. That's number one. Number two, college championship games are still interesting and important in my mind. Seeing the hoopla of a Big Ten championship, seeing the hoopla of an SEC championship. We've actually, I know this year kind of watered down that a little bit because we saw an SEC championship between Georgia and Texas where both teams got in anyway, and Texas got farther than Georgia, even though Georgia won the SEC. But those games are still fun to watch. Then you have Army Navy in the Heisman Trophy on that second Saturday. It's a fun time. It's a time that doesn't get blocked by the NFL. This year, the first playoff weekend has a lot of NFL games that are going around during that weekend. So it's almost an overload. I just want to see this improve by two teams, as you said before, make it from 12 to 14. I do not want to see a team who is 7-5 from the SEC possibly make the dance because of the fact that they have very good losses in there. And you still have the possibility for that even in the 2014 model. Because even though it allows seats to the table, there are other seats that the popular kids are going to send to the table to move to that final table. The problem with all of this is going to the CFP model before the original contract for the college football playoff 14 bowl system expired, made it so now in 2026 and beyond, you have to add more. You have to find more games to put on there, and you have to find a way to have a model. You either going to go another 6 to 7 years with a 12-team playoff. I'm okay with that.
Me too.
Or you're going to go more and more and more as it goes along. Just stop it. 12 teams, leave it completely alone. Realistically, there's not 12 teams that can realistically win the title. The one thing that you see even with college basketball is when that field has been expanded from 64 to 68, and luckily they're capping it this year and they're not jumping up any farther. They've decided on that. Is the fact that there are even worse teams in the Big Dance when you realize that there's 7 and 10 teams in conference in there. No. Do not want that. Do not need that. Can't have it. Leave it as is.
I will add one more thing. Think about how much trouble they got to the 12-team playoff system because of the Rose Bowl committee not wanting to give up the primetime spot every New Year's evening.
That's a tradition, though.
That's a tradition. When you're the granddaddy of them all, Anthony, you get to dig your heels in the sand. You get to put your chair out on the porch and say, "Get off my lawn."
Yeah, but think about this. They had to literally go around that and say, okay, in 9 years, when you're not part of the rotation, you do that. But as part of the rotation, they still stay in that spot. It's just become a playoff game.
Hey.
So as I said, they had to do a lot of working around that because like, the Rose Bowl committee was not budging at all. I mean,
honestly, I've said this before. The Rose Bowl should be a permanent playoff game. How do you have a playoff season? How do you have the CFP in any year where the Rose Bowl is not one of the playoff sites?
It's always no. So I'm gonna stop you there before we move on. I'm gonna stop you both there. It's always going to be a playoff site, but when it becomes a semifinal, they don't want to move it off its New Year's Day perch. That's what they're trying. That's what they always want. That's why they're not budging. Because technically, if we go through the rotation next year, the Rose Bowl would be a semifinal, and they don't want to ever move it off of New Year's Day. And that's what that's why they're digging their heels in the sand about. It's always going to be a permanent playoff game, but they like where they are in terms of date and time. And that's where we have the budget.
I only agree with expansion if the Pop-Top Bowl becomes
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Hey, you want to give college football back January 1? Get rid of week 0, guys. Get rid of week 0. Come on. It's week 0, the official week 1, and go from there. Enough.
That's another story for another time. Let's move on. All right. We usually go on the show with apologies to Clemson and LSU and Notre Dame and Miami. Those 2 games are really good week 1 games between teams in the preseason top 11. But for us, we're lazy. I'm going on vacation this week, so we're just going to do 1 game. 1 versus 2 meets in the opening week. There's a game of the year to start the season. It's the top 2 teams in the coaches poll. That's the Texas Longhorns and Ohio State Buckeyes. They're 1-3 in the AP, but for all intents and purposes, this is 1 versus 2 for me. They meet at the Big Horseshoe in Columbus for the game of the year, the game of the century, the game of the millennium, whatever. Anyway, this is also a rematch from the CFP semis last season when Ohio State won 28-14. Anthony and Jay have the questions for both teams. We'll start with Jay, and we'll start with Arch Manning. Hook 'em. He's now the man for the number 1 Longhorns.
If we're starting with Arch Manning, that would be Anthony.
Yeah, that would be me.
That's what I meant to say. Anthony, Arch Manning is the man for the number 1 Longhorns. Hook 'em.
Well, here's the thing. If you talk about expectations, when your last name is Manning, you were born right out of the womb with expectations, okay? That's just how it goes. I mean, when you have an uncle named Eli and an uncle named Peyton and a grandfather named Archie, yeah, the weight of the family legacy is on your plate. After Red Shirt in 2023 and basically being used as a sweeper in baseball terms for Quinn Ewers on occasions last season, he is the guy. He is the alpha male. He is the star quarterback for the Texas Longhorns going into the season. Now, when you have two career stars and they're against 2-10 Mississippi State and 5-7 Louisiana Monroe, not exactly the creme de la creme of opponents to get a strong sample size as far as what he can do. However, 939 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions over 10 games in his career gives you something of what you can expect out of Arch Manning. One of the going by a scout report, has an overhand delivery as far as his throws, can actually throw the deep ball, average 10 yards per pass. In fact, 15 of his 61 completions with a 20 plus yards in his career. And also, one of the things is that he gives Cecil Occasion's offense that Quinn Ewers didn't give is the added athleticism. The fact that Arch Manning, unlike his family legacy, is to say, he is a running threat and an athletic threat, and has been brought in on occasions, even in short yardage or red zone coverage, red zone yardage, in the last year or so. But going to the game plan against Ohio State, I mean, look, you got 100,000 people. It's a road game. They're defending national champions. Pretty much everything is on this kid's plate right out of the gate. What Sarkisian can do is basically keep the game plan simple as possible. That's pretty much don't lose the game, pick your poison as far as when you take your opportunities to get down to take shots downfield. Clean mechanics, no cheap negatives. Get him some early completions, even though short dump balls, or kind of get him some quick slants. Just get the kid in motion, get him calm his nose down, get him to be able to keep that to get that huddle under control just a little bit. Play ahead of the yardage. I think that's the most important thing. Try to keep the down and distance as manageable as possible with any young quarterback. We see it in the NFL all the time. But in the college, it's even more important because the home field advantage is even greater. I mean, we see these college environments. I mean, when they're rocking, baby, they're rocking, especially in Columbus. And here's the thing too, they just the Longhorns are talented enough where they don't have to ask Arch Manning to go out and win a game for them, but they have to ask him to don't lose the game either. Don't make any careless mistakes. Take the throwaway of his deal. Take your opportunities down the field when they're there. And here's the thing, the narrative. If he comes out and plays well right out of the gate, yes, the narrative and the expectations are going through the roof. If he struggles, you know the critics or everybody's gonna jump on this young man's case because his last name is Manning. I mean, and it's an unfair situation. It's one that Coach Sarkisian actually recognizes, but I think he can help his young quarterback out by trying to keep things as simple as possible, utilize the run game, try to manage the yardage and distance on offense, and then from there, you have an added gift in that Arch Manning is athletic. You can use him in rollouts. You can use him in quarterback draw plays. That gives you an added dimension to a playbook that you probably didn't have in Quinn Ewers, even though he may have been, as far as the stronger arm and a better pocket passer, by no without question. Arch Manning is not, it gives you the athleticism you didn't have last season that you can now take a full advantage of full time. So that would be the plan going forward. Can he meet the expectations? Absolutely. But it starts in this game particularly. If he plays well, win or lose, I think that would be a great that would definitely be a great step forward for Arch Manning as far as leading this team.
I think the one thing that you have to watch out for, though, is in a game like this, you can either make this a 13-10 ball game and hope your defense can ride out, and Texas is one of the best defenses in the country, or Arch is going to have to make the plays with his feet that he did in limited duty last year. Obviously, this is a much bigger spot, but if you have the hype going with you, I know you don't really have the resume going with you, but if you have the hype going with you, this is a spot where you have a lot on your plate, but this is a spot where you can really shine and step up and set the tone for the rest of your season. Now, the reason why I said this could be a 13-10 game, Jay, is for the number 3 Buckeyes. The reason why they are number 3 and number 2 in polls, even though they bring a lot of their team back, is the man under center is a little bit of a question.
Yeah. This is the big question coming into this, season for Ohio State is who's going to be throwing the ball to Jeremiah Smith, right? And the question wasn't answered until the beginning of this week when Buckeyes head coach Ryan Day named sophomore Julian Sayin as the week 1 starter against Texas. Now, the timing of the announcement after the second scrimmage wasn't really surprising according to those who cover the Buckeyes, as Will Howard was named the 2024 week 1 starter before the second scrimmage. Sayin, the 5-star recruit who was the top-ranked quarterback in the 2024 class, beat out junior Lincoln Kienholz after an 8-month-long quarterback competition. No matter which way this played out, Ohio State was going to be opening its national title defense, as a Michigan fan saying those words leaves a sour taste in my mouth, with a first-time play caller in offensive coordinator Brian Hartline, former Buckeye receiver, and a first-time quarterback. Neither Sayin nor Kienholz brought much of a resume into the competition to replace Will Howard, who completed 75.2% of his passes, averaged 287.5 yards passing per game with 8 touchdowns against 2 picks and a passer rating of 184.4 in the Buckeyes' 4-game run to the CFP crown. Sayin was third on the depth chart for most of last season, playing just 4 games, totaling 27 snaps in mop-up duty, throwing just 12 passes, completing 5. It's a 41.7% completion percentage for just 84 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks. Comes out to 128 flat passer rating. Kienholz didn't get in the game at all last season. You have to go all the way back to December 29th, 2023, and the Buckeyes 14-3 loss to Missouri in the Cotton Bowl for the last time he threw a pass. He was 6 of 17 in that game, 35.3% completion for just 86 yards, neither a touchdown nor an interception, and a passer rating of just 77.8. Now, the 6'1", 208-pound Sayin got the nod partially due to the upside that comes with his elite arm talent and the accuracy that he displays, especially when his feet are set and he's on time with his throws. Now, Day was impressed by Sayin's consistency, quickness, and decision-making, saying earlier in August, quote, he's very smart, he makes good decisions, and the ball comes out of his hand accurate. The big thing to watch with Sayin is whether or not he's able to consistently move the offense down the field week in and week out. He's able to do that in the spring game, but once the games are for real, that's a whole different story. Having a Heisman and Biletnikoff candidate as your number 1 option in the passing game in sophomore receiver Jeremiah Smith, who is coming off one of the best freshman seasons ever, 76 catches, a Big Ten leading 1,315 yards, 17.3 a catch, and 15 touchdowns, is a nice safety net for any quarterback, not just a first-time starter, ask Will Howard. And Sayin should have a decent 1-2 punch at running back with sophomore James Peoples and senior C.J. Donaldson, who transferred in from West Virginia, along with a very deep offensive line. But with all that as prologue, a complete unknown would be the title if Julian Sayin as QB1 was a movie. And in keeping with the cinematic theme, until we see how he handles the pressure of being QB1 at Ohio State, where CFP bursts and beating Michigan are what you're judged by, he's like a box of chocolates. The Buckeyes don't know what they're going to get. Texas is a hell of a way to open that box and start to find out.
Well, considering the fact that he was going to be with Nick Saban in Alabama in part of that little box moving forward, I think he does at least have a little bit of that eyes that he's actually seen some of the stuff. You never know what you're going to get, though, in a game like this. I think it's actually funny to see, as I'm going to go into what this game means for both of these teams. Now, going into this for a second, it's a hard way for Ohio State to start the season just because they're opening up at home and they'll have the pressure on them being at home. It's hard for Texas, too, because they could be a number 1 seed who loses. But I think the real question is, as we go into a new CFP ranking format where the top 4 seeds are the top 4 seeds, regardless of if you've won your conference or not, that's going to be a big help in this game. It does take a little bit of pressure off, but then you have to ask yourself the question, which one of these teams can afford a loss and still, obviously, it doesn't hurt you in the conference title standings, but doesn't hurt you in being a top 4 seed. And looking at this, I think the answer to this is actually Ohio State needs it more. I think looking at the schedule that they have, once they're done with this game, scrambling Ohio, Washington, Minnesota, you can probably just sing those, place anybody in there, and that'll be pretty much 4-1 or 4-0 right after that. But then at Illinois, who is a very good team this year, and then the big game is November 1st against Penn State. I think that game is going to determine a lot more for their season than this will, but you want to see a close game regardless of what you're going to. And yes, November 29th, Michigan is obviously a game that they're going to not forget anymore, regardless if Michigan is 6-5 or 11-0.
Nope.
But
we reminded them last year.
Yes, you did remind them last year, but it's going to be very interesting to see. I think the Big Ten could be more of a challenge for them than the SEC could be for Texas. Texas does not have it easy either. The biggest one in their schedule is a team who they lost to twice a year ago, going to Georgia. But that's at the end of the season. That's November 15th. The biggest games for them are at Florida versus Oklahoma, and then the game against Texas A&M is always their big one. That'll be the last Friday of the year of November. I think Ohio State needs this win more because they're at home, because I think it could build the momentum for the rest of their season. I think Texas can overcome a loss easier. If this game is a blowout, though, either way, it's going to make the teams think a little bit. It's not going to just be a loss that you can throw out and throw to the side, because chances are this game is really good. You're probably going to see the other team again in the future. Just ask Oregon what happened when you beat Ohio State barely and then found yourselves on the other side of them at the Rose Bowl. So you got to be aware, because when you play these teams now, again, these teams could very well play each other 3 times in just the span of 13 months, even though they're not in the same conference. You got to remember what you see, because chances are you might see it again.
Yeah, Rabbi, I agree with you. I don't think either one of these teams can afford to lose in a blowout, because that changes the narrative demonstrably, at least in the short term after the game. Can you come back from it? Sure, you can. But I think if you're talking about a loss that you can, as you said, throw out or not throw out, if it's a 1-possession game, you lose by a touchdown or less, then that game gets painted with a different brush, I think, by the committee down the road.
Yeah. Again, just seeing the words of committee when talking about the CFP, it excites us. So the last year was a lot more boring than I thought it would be, but let's see what happens in year 2 of this interesting experiment. Interesting experiment. Okay, well, the 12-team playoff, guys, I think we should just talk about more teams other than Ohio State and Texas and Michigan, but we can just leave them alone. Jay and Anthony, I'm going to give you 2 teams with huge CFP hopes this season. Have a question for you, and then I'll go a little more fringe. Don't worry, I'm leaving LSU alone this show. I don't want to put my face anywhere near them.
You don't want to jinx them.
I'll see them in week 1 versus Clemson, and then I'll give you my criticisms. Jay, preseason number 5, Georgia is title or bust every year now. And after last year's loss to Notre Dame in the CFP quarterfinal Sugar Bowl, Georgia's backup Johnny on the spot starter, his name's not Johnny, his name is Gunnar Stockton, he gets the pressure of a full campaign. He ready for that?
You know, how crazy is it that 3 of the top 5 teams in the AP preseason ranking and 6 of the top 10 will have first-time starters at quarterback this season? Number 2, Penn State with Drew Aller. Number 4, Clemson with Cade Klubnik. And the Rabbi's number 9 LSU Tigers with Garrett Nussmeier are the only schools in the top 10 with a returning starter. Number 10, Miami has a new QB1 in Carson Beck, but while the Georgia transfer may be new to South Beach, he's not new to being a starting quarterback. Now, as Rabbi noted, the guy replacing him at QB1 for Kirby Smart's 5th-ranked Georgia Bulldogs will be a starter for the first time, but he got his feet wet in the deep end of the pool last year, getting his first career start in the CFP semifinals against Notre Dame after replacing an injured Beck in the SEC title game win over Texas. And even though the Dogs lost to the Irish 23-10, Gunnar Stockton acquitted himself nicely. 23 of 32, 62.5% completion percentage, 234 yards, 7.3 per attempt, a touchdown, no picks, 134.2 passer rating. Stockton showed poise despite being under constant pressure from the Irish defense and showed some arm strength and talent with some impressive downfield throws. Flip side, he had a bad strip sack that resulted in a fumble. Now with the expectations that come with the QB1 job at Georgia these days, the legacy of Stetson Bennett and Beck hanging over his head, coupled with the lack of game experience prior to last year's postseason, he only played in 3 games before the 2024 SEC championship, throwing 12 passes against Tennessee Tech and 4 against UMass, after throwing just 19 passes all season in 2023. So it's no surprise that Stockton has plenty of doubters, starting with Paul Feinbaum. Back in May, the voice of the SEC pulled no punches while channeling his inner rabbi saying, quote, Gunnar Stockton is not an elite quarterback. He's serviceable, and that's about it, end quote. When offensive coordinator Mike Bobo was asked what he's looking for from Stockton coming into this season, the first thing he noted was, quote, there's loose plays all the time for the quarterback, and he's a guy that can extend plays and make plays by extending them and throwing the ball downfield and running with the football. Across both the SEC title game and the CFP semis, he took 6 sacks and 48 pass attempts. That's a 12.5% sack rate, partially because he held the ball too long trying to extend plays. He needs to clean that up and learn when to just throw the ball away and live to fight another play. The other thing Bobo mentioned was Stockton needing to learn how to layer his passes, saying, quote, he's a little bit of a gunslinger and working on, sometimes everything does not have to be a howitzer. Learning how to layer the ball. He's working on learning how to layer the ball because sometimes, it doesn't have to be a howitzer every time. Stockton said he spent the offseason playing around with his release, presumably in response to Bobo's comment about layering his passes, and possibly to improve the speed of his release, which tended to be on the slow side at times, as well as working on his footwork in an attempt to correct a tendency to overstride. Look, at the end of the day, Georgia's success should not be dependent on the arm of Gunnar Stockton. If the Dogs are constantly having to throw the ball 30 times a game, that's not going to end well. Bobo wants to get Georgia's dominant running game back after the Dogs finished next to last in the SEC in rushing a year ago. It was their worst rushing attack since 2011. A strong run game will take some of the pressure off Stockton. To that end, Georgia dipped into the portal and brought in running back Josh McCray, who led Illinois in rushing last season, 609 yards, 5.2 per carry, and 10 touchdowns. He'll pair with sophomore running back Nate Frazier, who led the Dogs with 671 yards rushing, 5 yards a carry, and 8 touchdowns. The key will be the Dogs' offensive line, which is younger and more experienced than last year's group. If they can win the line of scrimmage and create holes for Frazier and McCray, then Bobo can utilize Stockton in play action, which should put him in position to execute high percentage throws. To that end, Georgia also used the portal to provide Stockton with some additional weapons in the passing game. Nothing against the receivers who are coming back. They're decent and have experience, led by senior Colby Young, who Smart recently reinstated from suspension after his legal troubles were resolved. But none of them bear even a passing, no pun intended, resemblance to Brock Bowers or Ladd McConkey. Hence the Dogs bringing in a guy I saw play plenty over the last 2 seasons at USC, junior wide receiver Zachariah Branch, who averaged 39 catches, 415.5 yards, and 10.6 per catch. He's projected to start in the slot, and with his speed, the hope is that he can provide Stockton with a downfield threat to take top off defenses. Georgia also brought in senior wide receiver Noah Thompson from Texas A&M, who should give the Dogs the type of outside receiver they were lacking for most of last season. Bottom line, Georgia doesn't need Gunnar Stockton to carry the offense like Carson Beck did for a lot of last season. They need him to be poised under pressure, efficient in executing the offense, take what the defense gives him, and dial up a big throw when the opportunity presents itself. If he can do that, Georgia should be CFP bound once again. He'll get to ease into things with home games against Marshall and Austin Peay to start the season. Then he gets his first SEC test on the road at Tennessee and a chance to prove to Paul Feinbaum and the rest of the college football world that he's more than just serviceable.
Well, I mean, he's serviceable going into the season. I mean, if you don't see anything out there, there's nothing you can say that this guy is going to be really good. I think what you see from Georgia is also going to depend on what Mike Bobo actually trusts Stockton to do. I've seen a lot of talent leave Georgia. As you mentioned, Bowers and McConkey are 2 of the biggest weapons now in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
You saw it a little bit last year. and now is the real test. And Stockton doesn't need to wow the world, but he needs to be somebody who keeps up with other teams. It's going to be
He needs
very
to keep the
interesting.
chains moving.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see because a lot of big name SEC quarterbacks are now not in the SEC anymore. Does it become a new generation of SEC quarterbacks, or does this go back to the hard-nosed 4 yards in a cloud of dust league that it's been for so many years? It's a possibility, but the talent is in other places. Like Penn State, Anthony, preseason number 2 Penn State has brought back Drew Aller. Little surprising, but Aller did struggle a little bit at the end of the season. Not ready for the NFL, and he knew it. After last year's loss to Notre Dame in the CFP semifinal Orange Bowl, Aller comes back, but who the hell is he throwing to?
Yeah, Drew Allen, for his credit, played well in the regular season and kind of fell off a cliff in the college football playoff when he only completed 60% of his passes. I look at this. Tyler Warren, who is now in the NFL, caught a program record 104 passes. The Penn State Nittany Lions receiving core combined caught 102. And we're not even going to include Penn State alum Keegan Mikey Key, or for those of you who watch Key and Peele, Kringle McCringleberry. We're not even going to include him into this equation. Yes, Rabbi. Yes, Rabbi. I'm throwing that reference out there. But for the Nittany Lions and Coach James Franklin to get back to the college football playoff and particularly get out of the Big Ten, they're actually going to rely on a trio of transfer wide receivers to try to boost the passing game, at least as far as the wide receivers are concerned. Kyron Hudson transfers from USC. Trayvon Pena is a transfer from Syracuse, and Devontae Ross is a transfer from Troy. All three possess different skill sets that make them unique from one another. Hudson is the big body player with reliable hands. Ross is the speedster that can blow the top off a defense. Pena is more the versatile receiver who can line up outside or inside the slot. Now, for Pena, who transfers from Syracuse, 941 yards receiving last season, had to catch up a little bit after he arrived a little bit late. Transfer following spring football. So fall camp was really the first time he'd been able to practice with the team, so he kind of had to play a little catch up compared to the other two wide receivers. Ross, on the other hand, 1,043 receiving yards at Troy last season. And yet that wasn't what caught the Nittany Lions' attention. His performance against Iowa from last season, 142 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns at Kinnick Stadium last year, and he has a chance to replicate that very performance on October 18th when Iowa is again the opponent. And Hudson being the last transfer on the list, USC chosen 462 yards, 0 drops while splitting targets with Zachariah Branch and Jacoby Lane in the receiving core. Liam Clifford and Tyson Denmark, who are the 2 homegrown talents that's left over, kind of rounds out the receiving core. Depending on how much playing time, it's really going to determine how much they can contribute. But overall, the receiving core is going to have a tall task to pick up the kind of production that Tyler Warren was able to give them last year. Obviously, All-American, it's just a stud as a tight end, but 104 passes from one guy is real in a tight end position, in a ever-changing passing league. Well, we're not seeing a lot of teams feature the tight end so much these days. That's a very tall order that these three transfers and the receiving core as a whole is going to be asked to pick up. But if the Penn State Indians want to have any chance to get back to the college football playoff, it's not going to be just on Drew Aller to improve from what he did in the regular season and to be better than what he did in the postseason. He's going to need help, and the wide receivers that are coming in, and also the remainers that's kind of left over, they're going to have to pick up the slack and obviously carry their slack.
Ask the guy to my left what Tyler Warren meant to that team last year in that game at USC. A nightmare.
Tight end is like they needed to give him a position.
It's a concept for
It's
Tyler
a concept.
Warren.
It's not an act. It doesn't accurately describe what that guy did. I mean, he took the definition of a Swiss Army knife, a do-it-all, guy to a whole different level. I mean, tight end, running back, fullback, center, quarterback. I mean, the guy quite literally was the bulk of Penn State's offense. He was a terror no matter where he lined up. He's a matchup nightmare. And losing him is a huge hole that these transfers that they brought in are going to have to try and fill. And, you're not going to get one. There's not going to be one guy who's going to replace that production. They are going to have to do it in the aggregate. And the hope, as you noted, Anthony, was that combined, all three of these guys managed to get close to that level of production so that, Aller can actually feel confident throwing the ball downfield.
This is the best team, though, that Penn State's had in a long time outside of the question marks. That's why they're one of the top teams in the country and the favorite right now for some people to win the Big Ten.
Maybe this is the year James Franklin gets off his big game schneid. We'll see.
They get to the semifinals last year, which was a big step forward for him, but that loss to Notre Dame probably hurt. Okay. South Carolina is one of the only teams in the country. We mentioned, Jay was mentioning before how not many returning quarterbacks are coming on top teams. Actually, Clemson and LSU were two of those teams. They're playing each other week one. But the guy who I think is also a dark horse Heisman pick, didn't pick him here to diversify my portfolio of picks going forward, is Lenora Sellers. And I think a team that's going to be very dangerous this year are the number 13 South Carolina Gamecocks. He struggled at the beginning of the year last year, had 10 for 23 against Old Dominion, looked terrible against Ole Miss, had to sit out the second half of the game against LSU early in the season. But then against Alabama, he was pretty good. They ended up losing that game. And then from that point on, pretty much week 7 of the season until a game against Clemson where he was Superman out there, 166 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, finding ways to go away from all of Clemson's players and just was unstoppable on the field. He accounted for 2,174 yards, by the way, second half of the season, ran for 455 and accounted for 19 touchdowns. There are players out there who have raved over Lenora Sanders, Oklahoma coach Brent Venables. He's a monster. You can't do anything in practice to simulate him because he's thick and explosive. Texas A&M's Will Lee III there called him Adrian Peterson. He game against Missouri, he accounted for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns in a 34-30 win. The Clemson game was the piece de resistance of that second half of the season, and in that game, Sellers forced 10 missed tackles. Demo Sweeney says it was closer to 30, but the official record says he only forced 10. What you see from Sellers is the body of a linebacker and the running skills of a Lamar Jackson. This is one of the best quarterbacks that you're going to see in the nation, and he is the total package. Again, in a year where there's going to be a lot of overturning in quarterbacks, again, Arch Manning is the Heisman favorite, and he has basically never really played a full game that mattered at all. Sellers, of course, though, in South Carolina has a tough schedule ahead. They start at Virginia Tech, team that coach Shane Bieber should know real well because his father, Frank, was for years the head man at Virginia Tech and is a Hall of Fame coach. The biggest test started in October, where it is a minefield after that. 5 weeks from October 11th to November 15th at LSU versus Oklahoma versus Alabama at Ole Miss at Texas A&M. That is a murderer's row. Oh, yeah. And you end the season against your rival Clemson, who is the number 4 team currently in the preseason poll. Not going to be easy for South Carolina to match the end of the year. They didn't lose the second half of the season that I mentioned, but if there's a possibility of that happening, Lenora Sellers can do it. This is a dangerous South Carolina team, and We've seen a lot of the usual suspects in this conference. Georgia's been really good for years. We know about Texas. You know that famed SEC team, Texas, going in, even though they're just in year two. And a lot of interesting storylines are going to come about. But I like South Carolina. I like Lenora Sellers a lot. The SEC is packed, not as top heavy as it's been in years past. So there is a path for a team to kind of come on through, and that team could easily be the Gamecocks. All right, let us move on. And yes, I said Gamecocks. You don't have to refer to them as the Cocks, Anthony. That's only for Peacock, all right?
Oh no, this
Anyway,
is a PG show, by the way.
you've said it beforehand. Don't worry about it. Okay. Our season preview finishes off. Well, we'll finish off with Michigan, but we'll finish off this portion of it with the Heisman Trophy talk. As every year, this usually goes to the best gunslinger, man under center, head quarterback in charge. Not last year. It went to Colorado utility man Travis Hunter. Preseason pick plus 5,000. And now we are going to get our picks in that are going to be 100% forgotten after this. Jay,
Yep.
We've mentioned Arch Manning a ton on this show. He's the betting favorite. You go ahead and mention more about Arch.
Yeah, look, if this were any other season and the redshirt sophomore quarterback with 95 career pass attempts in question had any other last name, I'd be talking about the returning quarterback who was ranked number 1 in tier 1 of the Athletics 2025 college quarterback tiers, senior Cade Klubnik of Clemson, AP's preseason number 4 ranked team, who is coming off a season where he completed 63.4% of his passes for 3,639 yards with 36 touchdowns against just 6 interceptions and led the Tigers to an ACC title and a CFP berth. But this isn't any other season, and the redshirt sophomore quarterback with 95 career pass attempts in question is named Manning, and he'll be QB1 for the team ranked number 1 by the AP coming into the 2025 season. And since he's also, as Rabbi said, the odds-on betting favorite per BetMGM to win the Heisman, fair or not, we can't do this segment and not talk about Arch Manning, even though both Klubnik and LSU's Garrett Nussmeier, another returning starter from a preseason top 10 team, AP has them at number 9, have better resumes. The season opener for Manning is against defending champion Ohio State, as Anthony talked about previously. Yep, still feels disgusting in my mouth to say those words. Will again, fairly or unfairly, cause his Heisman candidacy to rise even higher or fall precipitously. Being the preseason favorite just increases the hype that is already surrounding Manning due to his famous last name, his recruiting profile, and the expectations based on the numbers he put up in weeks 2, 3, and 4 of last season, which is his only extended game action. 72 of the 90 passes he attempted all season happened in those 3 games, of which he completed 50 of those 72. That's a 69.4% completion percentage for 806 yards, 11.2 yards per attempt with 8 touchdowns against 2 picks and a passer rating of 194.6. Texas has the kind of schedule that will either make or break his Heisman candidacy. After facing number 3 Ohio State and Columbus on August 30, the Longhorns play 4 other preseason AP top 25 teams. They're at number 15 Florida in week 5. They have a semi-neutral site game for the annual Red River rivalry against Oklahoma. I say semi-neutral since the Cotton Bowl is in the state of Texas, followed by a trip to Athens to play number 5 Georgia, and they finish the season at home against number 19 Texas A&M, who dislikes the Horns about as much as the Sooners do. His skill set, rocket arm, throws with anticipation, ability to be on schedule with all the plays, athletic enough to be a factor in the running game, things Anthony noted as well. Along with the offense that Steve Sarkisian runs and the talent that surrounds him gives him a chance to put up big numbers. Add in the take from Dane Brugler, the NFL draft guru for The Athletic, who said after watching the Mississippi State game from last year, where Manning was 26 of 31, that's 83.9% completion percentage, 325 yards, 10.5 per attempt, 2 touchdowns through the air and 1 on the ground, no picks, 193.2 passer rating. Brugler's quote after that was, "You see a big athlete who plays in rhythm and has the arm to attack every level of the field." And you see where the hype and expectations come from. At the end of the day, I do believe Arch Manning will at least be in the Heisman conversation all season, even if he doesn't end up with an invite to New York at season's end.
It'll be very interesting to see because not only is it Manning, not only is he the quarterback from Texas, but being a possible projected #1 pick in the draft even puts more of a spotlight on you. And I'm very interested to see how Arch Manning deals with it because now is officially his time.
Yep.
If Arch Manning struggles, though, there's another possible #1 overall pick, Anthony, that's going to have a spotlight shine on him this season in Jeremiah Smith. And, oh, yeah, he had a pretty damn good 2024 CFP, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, here's the thing about wide receivers, and that always worried me. And I always made this joke, but it's actually a real thing. A wide receiver is only good as the quarterback that's throwing him the football. And we just find out literally this week who's going to be actually throwing the ball to Jeremiah Smith when the season opens up. But Smith is arguably the highest non-quarterback player on as far as Heisman Trophy betting odds. I mean, that's based on the fact that he had a phenomenal freshman season in 2024. 76 catches, 1,315 yards, 15 touchdowns, established himself as one of the best wide receivers in college football. Obviously, high expectations that comes with it. Former five-star prospect. He's exceeded expectations in year one of all of this, which has just been unbelievable. Nationals, you got obviously we're playing Ohio State. You get the national exposure, you get the big games, and he's clearly has shown he is not shy about big games. We all seen that. His college debut against Akron, 6 receptions, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. Leading the team in yards, 52-6 win for Ohio State. Big Ten Conference Freshman of the Week after recording 6 catches for 102 and 2 touchdowns in a win against Michigan State. Here's the big thing, though. The Rose Bowl game, as we all remember, 7 catches for 187, 2 receiving touchdowns, and an MVP performance against the Oregon Ducks. Big Ten Freshman of the Year, Big Ten Receiver of the Year, selected as the first-team All-American by NCAA, USA Today, and ESPN in 2024. Lead receiver during the Buckeyes' victory, obviously during the College Football National Championship. And here's another thing, too. He is the cousin of quarterback Geno Smith, obviously of the Las Vegas Raiders. And you know how I feel about video games. You know how I feel about color athletes. I picked Travis Hunter last year. He was on the cover of EA Sports College Football 25. He walks away with the Heisman. This season, Jeremiah Smith is also on the cover of EA Sports College Football 26. Is it a trend? I mean, is this the anti-Madden curse? You all know about that?
It might be.
You're on the Madden cover?
It might be.
You're on the Madden cover? Things go wrong? Prayers to Saquon Barkley, by the way, because he's on the cover this year. But hey, look, maybe Jeremiah Smith, if things work out with the quarterback position, he may make it 2 for 2 as far as my predictions and the 5 people have Electronic Arts, by the way. And I say that because I was a beta tester at one point in my life. But this kid is phenomenal. And I just like I said, it would not surprise me if he does get an invite to New York come December. But in the meantime, he's going to be a fun guy to watch. I mean, he was just sensational. It came out of nowhere really last season for the Buckeyes and helping them, sorry, Jay, to win the national championship.
Hey, we beat them.
That too, by the way.
Everybody wins, apparently, in a 7-5 season. That's exactly how it ended up going down. And then they beat Alabama, by the way, in their bowl game, too. So it really was a great end of the season for Michigan. So my pick is somebody that we've mentioned on the show before, and I haven't officially looked, but he might have been in our Heisman Watch segment last year. That's Carson.
I will check that.
Please look, because I actually was trying to keep looking at that too. Carson Beck is now at the University of Miami. I don't think he's with one of the Cavender twins anymore. I kind of looked that up too. This is the research that I do for this show. But he is a Jacksonville native, so he's going from Georgia. to Miami. And last year, he threw for 3,400.
Rabbi, you are
Did
correct.
we?
He was my pick in
That's
the
what I
Heisman
figured.
Watch segment last year.
Yep. So we're doubling up this year. Okay, so Jacksonville native, 3,485 yards, 28 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. We mentioned the fact that he did get injured in that SEC championship game, so we didn't have a chance. Never actually had a chance to really play in a playoff game. Didn't get into the playoffs in 2023 because of the one loss that they had to Alabama in the SEC championship that year and couldn't play in the Sugar Bowl against Notre Dame. So now he comes to Miami, and a lot of faith in him as a starter. But we mentioned it before, and it's going to be mentioned. The guy who he's replacing, Cam Ward, came in as a transfer. Another guy who was mentioned on the show as a Heisman contender before the show by Anthony when he was playing in Houston. But now the question is, can he be the third Heisman winner ever? The other two were Gino Torretta back in 1992 and Vinny Testaverde won in 1986. What he goes to now, first of all, what Ward did there last year was insane. 305 completions, 4,313 yards, 39 touchdowns. But the one thing that Ward never did was consistently win. In 27 appearances, Georgia was 24-3 over the last two seasons. And again, Beck, he spent 5 seasons under Kirby Smart in Georgia, 68% completion percentage, 628 of 923, 7,912 yards, a almost 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. That's 58-12. And what you're looking at is a team that led the nation last year, yards per game and yards per play. Ohio State and them had the same amount of offensive touchdowns at that time. They had the same amount of offensive touchdowns, and Miami played 3 less games than Ohio State did. They include the 3 games in the playoff when you mentioned that. So this is an undeniable situation for Georgia. Beck is going to have a softer schedule at the ACC, but again, it starts tough. They host Notre Dame in week 1. That's the first time the Hurricanes opened up against a fellow top 10 team since 2004. But 8 home games for Georgia this year. A visit from Florida September 20th, and then they have 2 bye weeks in a 3-week span. A bye week before facing off against in-state rival Florida State October 4th. Another bye, Louisville October 14th. Guys, Miami doesn't play a game outside of Florida until November. That's going to be a very interesting situation. I love what Beck has done in college so far with Georgia. He has kind of exceeded expectations playing under Mike Bobo, because I think Bobo is a lot more of a conservative play caller. Mario Cristobal is going to let him do whatever the hell he wants under center.
Oh, yeah, he's going to run this
going to be playbook. He's going to run the same playbook, and he's going to have the run of the mill, and he is going to be able to make more plays. And don't be surprised if Beck has a chance to be that third Heisman winner from Miami. He's going to have to do some exceptional things because he's going to play in a weaker conference. But again, get that Notre Dame game in week 1 is kind of a showcase, and the sky might be the limit if he can do well in that game.
Yep.
All right. Tonight, we finish off with one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not steal. Except if your name is Connor Stalions. Stalions, if you remember, is the man who led Michigan's off-campus in-person scouting scheme, impermissible recruiting inducements, and communications. Due to that, though, and head coach responsibility rules, individuals' failures to cooperate, and Michigan's failure to just monitor this situation at all, the punishments were finally handed down for this last week. Okay, that's a slap on the wrist. Here's another one. A fine based on Big Ten revenues that could add up to $20 million or $30 million in addition to other financial penalties. The NCAA also issued a 10-year show cause order for head coach Jim Harbaugh, now 61 years old. He's probably never coaching in college football again, even if he wanted to. Pete Carroll laughs. Jay now also laughs as well. He's a resident Michigan fan. Sum up the impact as this chapter finally closes and we get to the future.
Yeah, I'm going to say this up front, just as I did when the story first broke. The Michigan Stein stealing,
Steinbrenner
say
stealing.
that 10 times fast, guys, was a colossal Charlie Foxtrot that stained the reputation of the Maize and Blue and tainted the legacies and reputations of those involved, either by directly participating, like Connor Stallions, or by refusing to cooperate with the NCAA Committee on Infractions and thus preventing them from truly getting to the bottom of things, like Jim Harbaugh. But the type of penalties applied and the way they were handed down isn't at all surprising. Folks can complain all they want about no postseason ban being applied, no wins, such as the 2023 National Championship being vacated, and no scholarship reductions. But the NCAA recognized a long time ago that those types of penalties, even if they would seem to be required, unfairly penalize players for the actions of coaches and staff, especially when they're no longer at the school. Wins can only be vacated due to the use of ineligible players, so that doesn't apply here. And no less a figure than NCAA President Charlie Baker stated that Michigan won its title fair and square. And as Stallions was gone before the end of October, the wins over Penn State and Ohio State at the end of the year are also considered legit. So the NCAA did, as Rabbi said, the only thing it could do to penalize Michigan in a way that would actually hurt, handing down an 8-figure fine likely to surpass the $8 million penalty they hit Tennessee with in 2023, which was the largest on record for a previous infractions case. Now, that would equate to roughly 2 years' worth of postseason revenue. To put that in context, Big Ten schools received $7.87 million in postseason revenue in 2024, and that number is expected to jump significantly in 2026 to more than $21 million per school. Michigan was also fined 10% of its football budget, which equates to about $7.2 million based on available figures, and 10% of the money spent on football scholarships. That's not nothing, even for a school with pockets as deep as Michigan's. But at the end of the day, the two primary suspects involved in this mess, Harbaugh and Stallions, were penalized with nothing other than, as Rabbi said, show cause penalties. Now, for those not steeped in NCAA penalty vernacular, a show cause penalty prevents a school from allowing a coach or staffer under such a penalty from participating in athletic-related activities unless it can show cause to the NCAA why the restrictions should not apply. That coach or staffer would also be suspended from all activities for his first full year. Show cause used to be a black mark on the person and a red flag for prospective employers, but it doesn't seem to hold as much weight as it used to, hence the suspensions being added on. Harbaugh Stallions, along with current head coach Sharon Moore, were hit with those show cause penalties. For Moore, it's a 2-year penalty on top of the suspensions for Week 3 and Week 4 this season, but he's not leaving Michigan anytime soon. Stallions was hit with an 8-year show cause penalty and a 1-year suspension, but I highly doubt we'll ever see him on a college football sideline ever again. As for Harbaugh, Rabbi alluded to this already. He was hit with a 10-year penalty for this on top of an existing 4-year penalty for impermissible contact in a separate investigation. That means even if he wanted to come back to college football, he couldn't until 2038. Anybody think he's really ever leaving the NFL? So at the end of the day, outside of a hit to the school's pocketbook and a black eye to their reputation, which will fade with time, the penalties handed down to Michigan were, to borrow from the Bard of Avon, much ado about nothing.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to have to agree with you, Jay. I'm going to piggyback off you because the first thing I'm thinking while reading these penalties is, what are we doing here? Like, seriously, like, the guilty parties outside of Coach Moore are no longer with the school. Outside of the fine, which, by the way, even for Michigan, whose athletic program, according to ESPN, is expected to be $266 million for the, as far as the athletic budget, which is a lot of money. $30 million is still a lot. I mean, that's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
That you're gonna want that you can do for a lot of other things.
It ain't chump change.
So of course you're gonna appeal that. But Jim Harbaugh's show cause don't even kick into 2028 on top of the already 4-year existence show cause that's there. Moore is almost like he's volunteering to sell 2 games this year and a game next season, but that's not doing a whole lot. I think what it is that this is one of those situations where people expected the NCAA to be judge and jury in a situation where there's nothing to be judge and jury on because the guilty parties are not part of the school anymore. Like and unlike a particular ESPN personality I'm not going to name because he said the national championship is illegitimate, you're wrong as always. This happened in October, okay? That takes nothing away from what happened in November, December, and the beginning of January when they became national champions. So let's just get that nonsense out of the way right there. Right there is that if you're Ohio State, you're Michigan State, or one of these Big Ten rivals, and you're kicking and screaming and boo-hooing, guess what? What do you think the NCAA? What do you expect the NCAA to do? Throw the death penalty at them? No, there was nothing like this whole thing. It felt more like something you're gonna see at the Naked Gun than like an actual NCAA violation that would have been worthy of a major punishment. I mean, it's a slap on the wrist because who are you punishing right now? You think Jim Harbaugh is coming back to college coaching again? I think the charge is probably his last coaching job, period, because he's starting to get up there in age. He's 61, for peace sake. Stallions is pretty much gone. I think there's another name involved.
Sharon
Moore. He's got 3 games, and that's really not much. I mean, the games are gonna miss. I think Michigan could do just fine without him being on the sideline, and it's a big nothing burger at the end of the day. That's pretty much what this is. 2 years worth of investigation, but pretty much really turned out to be a really waste of air because at the end of the day, there's really nothing to punish. That was the whole thing to all this. You can't strip the national championship away. You can't throw the book at the program itself because now you're punishing players who had nothing to do with it. So the whole investigation was going to run into a dead end, even from the word go. And this is the end result. I mean, I think that's it. I don't know what people expected this investigation to lead to, but I'm not surprised. It's just, what exactly are you going to punish that in this situation when the parties that's involved outside of Coach Moore are no longer part of the university?
Mm-hmm.
By the way, let me just clean up something. Sharon Moore is a 3-game suspension, if I'm not mistaken. First 2 being
two this year, and then one next.
The Central Michigan game and Nebraska game this year, and then next year he'll serve the final game of that suspension. Yeah, much ado about nothing. Harbaugh got his national championship with Michigan, probably the peak of his college career. Moved on, and we'll see. And the one thing that Michigan can take all of this is none of their wins against Ohio State over these last few years will ever have to be vacated because they still live on. And you know what? Any vacated wins, I think the NCAA has learned, don't mean shit because we've seen them.
No.
There is video evidence that these games have happened. And regardless of violations, suspensions, and all of that stuff, can't take it away.
No,
hey, look,
take away what you see with your eyes.
Like I said, the criteria for vacating wins is if you used ineligible players, and that didn't happen.
Nope, not at all.
Anyway,
and I'll say this for you Ohio State fans, Michigan didn't need to steal signs to kick your nuts in the dirt the last 2 years. They just went in and did it on their own. Okay, so get over it. You want to shut them up? You want to shut them up? Beat them. Simple as that, all right? That's just what it comes down to. Don't get mad and cry wolf because they came into your town and kicked your ass. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, with Hunter Stallion's already gone and Jim Harbaugh suspended for that game, and we still went in and kicked your butt.
And then they decided to kick their butt last year when there was no Jim Harbaugh or no Connor Stallions, and they were past that year. So we'll see what happens.
The ass kickers are flying. The Mason's playing. I mean, we know what that. That game jumped out.
Let's not mention that part. That's also a black mark on all of college football and rivalry weeks. Okay. Hopefully this sets you up somewhat for your 2025 college football season. Enjoy week 0 on Saturday. I'm sure Jay will. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I am Steven Rabinowitz being hit with a 2-week show cause penalty. It's called vacation. YouTube.com/on-the-sports-lines on demand, Facebook.com/on-the-sports-lines live, and we're not done. Not so fast, my friend Jay.
Yeah, our Twitter handle is @OnTheSportsLines, where you'll find a link to each new show like today's, along with tidbits and nuggets from the world of sports that we think are worth your time to check out. The August 30th marquee matchup between number 1 Texas and number 3 Ohio State that we preview tonight is the first big game of the 2025 season for college football, but sadly, it is also the last game of Lee Corso's 38-plus year run at the desk of ESPN's College Game Day. In advance of that, Christopher Kamrani and Justin Williams of The Athletic reached out to folks who have worked with Corso over the years and got their favorite stories about the grandfather of college football. The link to the story is on our Twitter page, and if you're any type of college football fan, it's well worth your time to check out. I think all of us wish he would pull a not so fast, my friend, on his retirement, because fall Saturdays just won't be the same without Lee Corso.
And amazing to see that the first headgear pick where he made it was Brutus Buckeye, and that might just as well be the last headgear pick he makes. Sorry, guys. Back in 2 weeks for the first week of September when we do our NFL preview. I might break some fronts along. I don't know. Enjoy yourselves. Enjoy the rest of summer, and we'll see you back post Labor Day. Good night,
everybody.
Good night, everyone.